Hi, I'm Jeb Butler, and this is Brittany Partridge of the Butler Kahn Law Firm. We're here to talk today about a $1.6 million settlement that our firm just got. Ms. Partridge can tell us about the facts.
Yes, so last year our client's father was in a parking lot going to the grocery store. He was just about to enter the grocery store when all of a sudden an elderly driver attempted to back out of his parking spot. And instead of, the normal backing up, he mistook the gas for the brake and wound up colliding with our client's father, Mr. Phillips, and actually did not stop driving until he hit what I've now learned is called a bollard.
Bollard.
Thanks to Jeb. And here we actually have the police report we can look at just to give you a viewpoint diagram of that. So here you can see the at-fault driver's vehicle is in the parking spot. He backs up and there's a little red dot that you may be able to see, and that's actually Mr. Phillips, supposed to represent Mr. Phillips. And at the very bottom you can see that bollard, which is what the at-fault driver collided with in order to stop his vehicle from going forward.
Since we're having some fun with language today, let's see if I can pull up a bollard. So a bollard is like a short, stubby pole that used to be used on to tie ships down, but now we see them a lot in our daily lives, just like this, to block cars from going into areas where they're not supposed to, which is exactly what it was needed for here, because it hadn't been for that bollard, then the at-fault driver's vehicle would likely have ended up in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. As it was bad enough because it ended up over our client's father. But I feel like I interrupted you to talk about bollards.
That's about it. Unfortunately, our client did die of his injuries. He did get transported to the hospital, but he basically had died at the scene. And so it was actually up to his child to bring the claim for him, which we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Yeah. Yeah, so first we talk about investigation, how we figured out what happened. Anytime there is a collision near a commercial establishment like this, these days one of the first things we think about is surveillance footage, and Brittany was all over that. Went out and obtained some surveillance footage. It took, I think, phone calls, emails. There's another lawyer who said he had it and tried to send it to us, but we never did get it that way. But we got it from the grocery store. After spoliation, letters about preserving the evidence and everything else. After all this, the video shows what happened, but it's not all that helpful. We can actually take a look at it now. So it's here behind us, and it's just not going to be very easy to see. But over, let's see if the little mouse will show. Yeah, right here, this man in a white shirt is our client's father. So you'll see the vehicle backed up, and you can tell what happens, although the video isn't very descriptive. So there it was. Someone hits the gas when trying to hit the brake, I guess, or the throttle, and ran over him, backed over him. Of course, investigation doesn't stop there. It's not just about surveillance video. We found 3 witnesses listed on the police report, and Brittany got after them and called them. None of them had seen the collision, so weren't able to be of too much help, but that's almost not the issue in a case like this. We knew what happened, and proving it wasn't going to be, we didn't think, all that challenging. But still, you want to make sure, even if you don't need the help from a witness, you want to call them and make sure they're not crazy. They're not going to say something that is problematic for our case. So, we were able to do that. But investigating the facts is only part of working up a wrongful death or personal injury case. You also have to figure out what kind of collectability that is, and that usually means insurance.
Yes, and in Georgia we have a statute that allows us to send a letter to insurance companies and ask for the limits of insurance policies that might apply to a wreck. And in this case, we wanted to get the insurance information sooner rather than later. And in Georgia, these insurance companies have 60 days to respond. So in order to obtain that information a little bit quicker, we used a third-party vendor to do a policy limit search for the at-fault driver. And we used the information on the police report to obtain the insurance company and the insurance policy. Well, the third-party vendor we used actually returned results for $25,000 policy, which is actually the minimum in Georgia.
So here on the screen behind us is the statute or the law that Brittany referred to says you have to, that the insurance has to provide it within 60 days. But you were talking about the FPL, which is in an Adobe file, I think?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we have that third-party request here, and basically attorneys or even just people could send a request to these third parties to try to figure out if there is insurance involved in a wreck. The company will send back some information about the policy, one, if they can find a policy, and then two, what the limits of the policy are. And in this instance, this was the information that we got back, and as you can see, there's a check mark up by the 25,000, 50,000, which is the minimum limits in Georgia. So based on the minimum limits, we decided to file suit to try to make sure there weren't any other insurance policies that could apply to the wreck or might apply to the wreck. And we were surprised to learn that the at-fault driver actually had two insurance policies, and one was for $500,000 as his automobile insurance policy, and one was actually a $1 million umbrella policy. So he had a total $1.5 million in insurance. And also, Mr. Phillips had his own insurance policy through underinsured motorist coverage for $100,000.
Yeah. So in a wrongful death case, there are a couple different kinds of claims that we bring. There's the wrongful death claim, and then there's the estate claim. And I think our notes say I'm supposed to talk about both. All right, I'm on it. So they're for different components of damages. There are different parts of what has been lost when someone is killed. A wrongful death claim is brought by a surviving relative. Who it is depends on what kind of relations the decedent had, but it's for the, quote, full value of the life, end quote, of the person who died. So that means the real things that we live for, family, friends, and faith, the stuff that really matters to us, the value of all that, as high as that may be. And then the money that a person would have earned throughout the course of their life. That's all part of the full value of the life, which is the wrongful death claim. Separately, you bring the estate claim, and that would have the claim for conscious pain and suffering, if any. Here, there wasn't a lot of that. We didn't have evidence of conscious pain and suffering. And it would also include punitive damages and funeral expenses, some other miscellaneous things. But typically, one brings both. The wrongful death claim is brought by a surviving relative, depends on who they have as to who it is, and then the estate claim is brought by the administrator of the estate. Sometimes that's set out by a will. If not a will, then you have a probate court appoint somebody typically. But you bring both. Having said all of that, in a wrongful death case like this, here the damages are just tremendous, right? I mean, someone has died, someone's father is gone. And sometimes there is just not enough money to really compensate for that. I mean, how could there be? But most times when you have a car wreck case like this, the at-fault driver, unless they're unusually wealthy, they don't have a lot they can really do. They can really compensate for a loss like this. So you end up looking for what kind of insurance was available. And so that's why our insurance search that Brittany talked about earlier is so important. And that played into our final settlement, of course.
Yes, and so we did make a policy limits demand to the at-fault driver's insurance company. He actually had two different insurance companies, but both companies accepted our demand, and they paid the $1.5 million. And then we also sent a policy limits demand to Mr. Phillips' insurance company, and they also paid the limits, resulting with a total settlement of $1.6 million.
Yep, $500 for the underlying auto insurance. Was it $1 million for the umbrella?
Yes.
And then you said $100 for the UM. So we ended up with a $1.6 million settlement and a happy client.